Welcome to the Andrew D'Angelo podcast.
Constant Constance. Each week, Andrew, renowned jazz saxophonist and brain cancer survivor, invites us to look at the many worlds of his guests, with conversations that cover all the arts, human resilience, a little bit of politics, and a lot of humour.
You can't fail to have a fantastic time.
Hey everyone, and welcome. I am beyond excited to ta-da, to have my next guest today. It's today or this evening for us, whatever it is for you. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary, the amazing, the sweetest, kindest woman, singer, artist, musician, Miss Sheila Jordan. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Andrew. How sweet of you to have me. I'm very honored. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and I actually had butterflies before we got on this recording. I was nervous, and we've both been around for a while. But I was just excited, and I was talking with our mutual friend James Gavin, who is an author and also an amazing photographer. He took a photo of you at the Birdland Theater. Very recently, you did a show there. Do you remember this show? Maybe 2 weeks ago?
I'm not sure. I think it was on my 93rd birthday celebration.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
And I was
I love James. He's a great guy.
Isn't he the sweetest guy?
Just the best.
I was like, man, James.
Great writer.
Yeah, great writer. Everybody, he's been on the show, and so everybody knows about his work. But I was like, I sent James a text and I said, hey, do you think Sheila would be willing to come on my show? And he's like, I don't know, I can ask her. So it was just really fun. And the photo of you is really amazing from that show.
Thank you.
And excuse me. I was just curious. I mean, what is that like? I mean, you said you've been pretty much singing and playing music since like what, 1945?
14. I always sang. I was on the Michigan Theater when I was 3 years old. Because my grandparents raised me, because my mother was only 17 when she had me. But I would go and spend, as a little kid, I would spend like maybe, summer months with her. But I was a little kid, I would love to sing. So I was always singing. I sang on the radio programs, the ones where, what do they call those? Talent shows.
Talent show, right, yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember on the Michigan Theater, I think I was about 3 years old, and I came in second place.
Wow.
Yeah.
At 3?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
I was tiny. I was this little tiny kid.
So you've been singing for 90 years, basically, right?
Yes.
That's, oh my God. God bless you.
Not professionally per se. I just love to sing. I had a very, very unhappy childhood. We were very poor. My family was riddled with alcohol, so there were a lot of alcoholics. Most of the family drank, and I'm from on my mother's side. Her father, my grandfather, was from his mother was his grandmother, I should say, was Queen Aliquippa of the Seneca Nation. So I'm from Native background on my mother's side.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
When it comes to, and if you don't want to get into it, you can just not answer the question.
Get into anything. I don't hold anything back.
So did you find that if your parents were, or your family was into alcohol, and you didn't say anything about abuse, but I would assume they were abusive on some level, but you can correct me. Did singing, was that kind of an escape for you, or a way of?
Yes.
Right.
As I said, I was very unhappy, and we were very poor. We had no toilet in our house.
Wow.
This was with my grandparents now, because as I said, my mother could not raise me. She was too young. my father married her a very, not too long before I was born to give me a name. In those days, it was important to be legitimate. So my father did marry my mother, but I never really knew my father that well.
Right.
But my grandparents, since my mother was only like 17, my grandparents took care of me and I lived with them. And unfortunately, my grandfather had the serious disease of alcoholism. And it was actually ran in my family on my mother's side. I don't know about my father's side. I didn't know that much about him or his father or mother or his siblings. I don't, to this day, I know that I have some stepsisters, but I'm really not, that close with any of them. I mean, I'd like to be close with them, but it just didn't work out. But on my mother's side, that's who took care of me. And unfortunately, we were one of the poorest family in town, in this little town and coal mining town in Pennsylvania state. And I grew up with the coal miners. And
Wow.
most everybody in the town was a coal miner. My grandfather, his mother, or his grandmother, I think 4th-generation grandmother was Queen Aliquippa, as I said, and she was queen of the Seneca Nation. So he was native, and I'm native on my mother's side of the family. And they had the disease of alcoholism, which of course later on I got myself. But I found a program, which I won't advertise, that I've been in for 35 years now. And I haven't had alcohol in about 43 years.
Wow.
And I don't miss it, but it was just what they did. They drank,
Yeah, I mean, it seems that historically, I mean, I've had people on my show who were in their 20s, and
Yeah.
I've had people on my show who are 80, and then of course you. So and then anywhere in between. And looking back to the mid 1900s, for lack of way,
Yeah.
something like this. I mean, my mom had my sister at 18, had my brother at 20, had me at 22, had a miscarriage at 26. She had already had 4 kids by the time she was 26.
Wow.
Right, but you told a similar story. Like, you were
Yes.
born at 17, your mother was 17, and I mean, nowadays, I mean, I just had a friend who was 50 who just had a kid. Well, a few
Yeah.
years ago, but he was 50. I have a friend who's 53 and just had their first kid. It was just such a different time. And like you said, the boozing, and then people were smoking
Yeah.
cigarettes, and it was just a completely different time period, like almost
Oh,
like
yes.
inconceivable. And as a follow-up, what I wanted to ask you, since you've been around, I mean, you experienced war. I don't know if you were around during the Depression. You were probably very young if you were. The Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, the gay rights, 9/11, all this stuff. And then now, recently, since 2020, this pandemic or whatever.
Yeah.
How does it? Can you explain how that's fit in for you? And when you did your 93rd birthday celebration at Birdland Theater, were you worried about the virus? Are you wearing a mask? Or whatever?
I had a mask, but I wasn't worried. I'm just not, I don't know. I can't, there's been so many things in my life that have been, challenging, that I don't worry about that. And I'm still here at 93. So I just can't get involved in worrying about, hey, am I going, I don't know. The fact that I'm still alive is amazing to me.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you know my story, my health story? Can I tell you real briefly? I've talked about it on the show.
Please.
So in 2008, I had a seizure while I was driving, and they discovered like a huge, massive brain tumor in my.
Oh my God.
Right. And so anyway, MRIs of two brain surgeries, they found out it was a glioma, almost stage 4, like terminal brain cancer. They gave me a year to a year and a half to live. And, thankfully I'm still here. I'll send you I'm actually missing half my brain. So that's, if I act weird, then there you go. But it's true. But one thing that like people, when I had brain cancer, they said they were worried I wasn't worried enough. And I was like, what do I worry about? If I'm going to die from cancer, I'm going to die from cancer. I might as well enjoy myself and make music, right? And just have fun. And people are like, you shouldn't be doing shows, you might hurt your brain. And I'm like, I wasn't laissez-faire, but I'm just trying to relate to you saying, at a certain point, what does worrying do for us,
That's right. Yes, you have to do what you have to do as long as you can do it. Why would you give up something that you love that makes you feel good? I mean, so I don't know, I don't know whether it hinders or makes whatever it is you have, progress quicker. I don't know, but all I know is I'm not giving it up.
Right.
As you didn't. So, it kept you alive as long as it did, as long as it has. So, we have to do what we have to do.
Yeah. And I think what I'm gleaning from what you're saying, and this is something that I just felt intuitively when I listened to your music and everything, is I was interviewing Mr. Peter Roth, who is he does healing work, whatever that means to people. Okay. I know some people think it's quack, but he's not. He's a good guy. And he said, Andrew, your music healed you. The fact that you played music and you kept doing what you were doing and you weren't worried. And people can believe that or not. I mean, obviously there are different opinions, but I'm just trying to tell you that on a real level, I can understand what you're saying, that when you were young, you had stress, so you would sing in the shower or do the talent show or whatever you could to distract yourself from whatever chaos or what was happening. And now in the middle, 100 years later, we're in this weird pandemic and all these politics and stuff, and you're still just like staying focused on what? The love? Is it the love? Is it the joy, Sheila? I don't know.
Well, first of all, let me say, I didn't sing in the shower as a kid because we didn't have water in our house. My grandparents had a well outside. We didn't even have a faucet inside.
Wow.
We had about a walk about a block to the outhouse. Toilet paper was a Sears Roebuck catalog. You rip the sheets out of that. That's the toilet paper. Our house was heated by a wood stove that also burned coal. We didn't, and then we had another little stove in the room next to it. So we lived in those 2 rooms downstairs and 2 bedrooms upstairs, and all the kids slept together in one room on mattresses. Sheets? What the hell was a sheet? We just slept on a mattress, It was rough, and that was my grandparents that raised me until I was 14. And then when I was 14, my mother had me come and live with her in Detroit, Michigan. Now, all this time that I was in Pennsylvania, going through all of this hardship, a lot of times not enough food to eat. We were on welfare. And as I said, my grandfather unfortunately had the disease of alcoholism. So all the money that he made, he was a painter, a decorator, but all the money that he made went to booze. He drank it all up. So I had a very, very tough childhood. It was very rough. And then when my mother decided that she could take care of me when I was 14 years old, and by this time she was a little older, I went to live with her. Unfortunately, she was married many times. In those days, you just didn't live with somebody and then leave them. In those days, you had to be married.
Right. Yeah.
You had to have a marriage license. The men that she was married to, most of them, except one, were creeps. And came on to me, you know, as a teenager.
Oh, geez.
And at 17 years old, I graduated from high school, and I decided I'm out of here. I'm not going to live in this environment. It's too dangerous.
Sure. Yeah,
And so
get
I
out.
left home. I left home. I left my mother. And I found a place called the Evangeline Home that you could rent a room, and they gave you your food, your room and board, and you paid them so much. And I had a part-time job typing, because that's what I took in high school. And I finished my high school living in this home, you know, the Evangeline Home, it was called.
Right.
So I stayed there, and I was working from there after I graduated. And then my aunt, who was like my sister, she was my mother's sister, but she was like my older sister. She decided that she didn't like me living in a home like that. And so she rented me a room in her house. And she was married to a very nice man, and she had a couple of little young boys. And so I rented a room from her. And I stayed with her until I decided to move to, well, actually, I stayed with her, and then I met Frank Foster, who was moved from Cincinnati, I believe. And he was kind of like the cat on the scene. And I loved his playing, and we became romantically involved. He was my first boyfriend.
So where are we in the timeline?
In Detroit.
No, I mean, like, your age, about where are we now?
Oh, I was about 18.
About 18. Okay, I'm just sorry. I sort of
that's okay.
lost track of
problem.
like where we
and
are
at
at this point.
18 years old, you could get into the clubs.
Okay.
In New York, anyway, and in Detroit. So I met Frank, and I started living with Frank. He was my boyfriend. And we lived in a little furnished room on John R. in Detroit, Michigan. And we were together until he got drafted into the army, into the Korean, I think it was the Korean War.
The Korean War, okay.
Yeah. And so he was in the army. And so when he went into the army, I decided that I was going to move to New York and be near Charlie Parker's music. Because I had met Bird at the Greystone Ballroom when I was about 14. I was quite young. And I was singing with these two African guys. And it was difficult in Detroit because Detroit was very, very racially prejudiced. Oh, my God. I was always down at the police station for being with my friends who happened to be of color. And I remember one time I was arrested for being with Frank. And
just for being with Frank, period?
Yes,
wow.
Yes, because he was black and I was white.
Right.
And they took me, and this cop took me down to the police station to question me. And he said, I'm going to call your mother. I said, great, if you can find her. He said, what do you mean?
Sorry for laughing, but yeah.
I said, I don't live with my mother. I haven't lived with my mother since I was graduated from high school. Or before, I said, I've been on my own. He said, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. He said, do you see this gun? And there was a gun on his desk. He said, if I thought, I have a 9-year-old daughter at home. If I thought I was going to find my 9-year-old daughter like I did you tonight with these, and he used the word N-word. I don't use that word for Africans. I never have. I hate it. I think it's an ugly word.
Me too.
Disrespectful word. But he used it. He said, if I thought I would find my 9-year-old daughter like I did you tonight with these N's, I would take this gun and go home and blow her brains out.
No.
Yes.
You know what's interesting is,
and that's a true story.
Right. That's okay. So I've had several folks on this show who are black males who grew up in America, and they've all almost have told, like all of these musicians have almost told the same a similar
Yes.
story about growing up in America as a Black kid.
Oh, yes.
And so these, like, the folks like, you know, Eric Rivas from The Sheet or J.D. Allen, they're about my age. We're all generally the same, but they're like, yeah, I mean, that was just like, it was a rite of passage the first time you got called the N-word by a
Yeah.
cop or by, you know, a schoolmate or something. I was like, okay. Like, I think that a lot of Americans feel like this racism was hundreds of years ago and no longer exists. And
Well, maybe they do today, but at that time they didn't. I mean, Detroit, first of all, was had a very high rate of racial prejudice.
right, it sounds like it.
Detroit was very, very much so. And I remember that. What I was going to tell you is I always sang from the time I was 3. I was always singing. I loved to sing. It made me feel better. When I was unhappy, I'd sing and it would make me feel better. I didn't know what kind of music I wanted to sing. I just sang the hits of the day, and there were great hits great songs because it was the Cole Porter, George Gershwin. You know, we're talking about like years ago. I'm 93 and I was 14 at the time. So I heard this music, but I was 14. I had just moved with my mother.
Right.
And I was going to high school, to Commerce High School in Cass Tech in Detroit. And there was a jukebox across the street. And they always had music on it. And I remember, I always saved my nickels. And I went over this one day to get my sandwich for lunch, and I saw this thing on the recording on the jukebox said Charlie Parker and his Reboppers, not Beboppers. Reboppers.
Huh.
And I said, oh, and it was Now's the Time. And I said, oh, I think I'll put my nickel in and see what that's like. That was it. I heard like maybe 4 bars of him.
And you're like, I'm in, right?
That was it. That was it. Changed my whole life. And as I said earlier, I had to find out where this music was. I knew that it was African music, and that in order to find out this music, I had to go into the neighborhoods where the African kids lived. And I remember that I started, my friends became all young African girls. And I remember the principal in my school called me into her office. And she said, you dress so nice. Why do you hang around with colored girls?
Oh my God, that's horrible.
The principal.
Yeah, Jesus. Right.
I said, oh, colored? And I don't know where this came from. This has happened a lot in my life where something just takes over and it ain't me thinking it. It just comes out of nowhere. And I said, color? Purple?
Jeez, right.
Pink? Orange? Lilac? Blue? Red? She said, get out, get out. She was, and she was the principal of the school.
That's so let's just put a decade on this. 50s? Is this what we're talking about? 40s? What year, like decade?
No, it was when I was in school. I was 14. How old what year would that have been? I'm 93 now.
Oh no, I can't do math.
I can't do it either.
Okay.
I would say it was probably in the 40s, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just something that
I was in high school.
Right.
I was in high school, and I didn't have that. I wanted to hang around the people who I felt comfortable with, the students, and I wanted to be around this music. And through this music, there were other young people growing up, and there was a club in the little town, downtown Detroit. I think it was called the Club Sudan, but I'm not sure. and I met Barry Harris, Kenny Burrell, Tommy Flanagan.
Wow.
And they became, like they were doing this music and I wanted to do this music. So, and Barry would tell you, he met me when I was very young. So it was difficult though, because not only, personally, my mother could have cared less. She was just so strung out on booze. She died from alcoholism.
Sorry.
So, I don't think my mother really had that prejudice thing going. Unfortunately, the men that she was married to were creeps and came on to me. So that's why I left as soon as I, even before I got out of high school, I had to leave because I couldn't take the fact that, like the one husband that she was with at that time could have raped me. So I didn't want to be around that. So I got scared, and my aunt took me, and the one that was the youngest, Esther, her name was. She was like my big sister. So I went to, as I said, I went to the Evangeline home and stayed there for a couple of years and finished high school. And then I went and I lived with her, and she took me in, and I paid her so much money a month when I was finished with school and working, because I took typing. So, I always had a job. I met Frank Foster, and then I started living with him. And then after Frank went into the Korean War, I moved to New York because I wanted to be near Charlie Parker, because I met Charlie Parker, heard me sing with these two young African guys, Skeeter Spite and Leroy Mitchell. And they were singing these bebop tunes. And we had an incredible saxophone, elderly man. Well, at that time, he was, we looked up to him. And they were doing this concert. Charlie Parker was doing a concert at the Greystone Ballroom, which was great because we could go. We were kids, but we could go because they didn't sell alcohol. So we could go and hear Charlie Parker play live.
Wow.
What a treat.
It must have been amazing.
Oh, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And so this elderly saxophonist, Billy Mitchell, his name was, he worked with a lot of different bands, groups, but he was a bebop player. He told Bird, he said, "You got to hear these kids sing," meaning me and Skeeter and Mitch. He said, "They sing all your songs and they write lyrics to your songs." So during the break, Bird came over and he said, "I understand you kids sing some of my compositions." And we were like shocked.
It was like
scared.
like meeting Elvis or something like that, right?
Oh,
it was just
my God. Well, I don't know. I wasn't an Elvis fan.
Well, but whatever. It's like you're meeting royalty.
Whoever your idol was.
Right,
yes.
like the Beatles or Elvis or like James Brown. Or
my
whatever.
idol was Charlie Parker.
Right, sure.
So Bird went back up after the break and did his song and did a one tune, I think. And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I have a surprise for everybody. I understand there's some young people in the audience, a group that sing my songs. I'd like to have them come up and sing." And we looked around like, "Oh, I wonder who that is."
Yeah, I wonder who he's talking about.
We never dreamed he was talking about us.
That's amazing.
And then he pointed over at us. He said, "Yeah, you kids."
Wow.
And as I said, it was the Greystone Ballroom, and we were cool there because they didn't sell alcohol. It was a concert,
right? So
kids could go to it. So we got up and we were shocked. I don't remember what we sang. It might have been Confirmation or Barbados or Rhythm. I don't remember. We knew all the heads. it might have been confirmation. Anyway, we sang, and then after the concert was over, Bird immediately came over to us, and he looked at me and he said, "Kid, you got $1 million ears."
Wow.
And I had no idea. What does he mean, $1 million ears?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you. I saw that quote on the internet. I was going to ask you what you thought he meant by that quote.
What does that mean, $1 million ears?
I don't know.
Well, it meant that I could hear. I could hear all of these chord changes. I could hear this music and I could identify with it and I could sing it. I found out later.
Sheila, something interesting is happening in my life. I'm doing this remote project with these musicians in Germany, and we're doing it like all passing the files around and recording our parts, and which is fine. I'm enjoying the process, but I need to play with a keyboard player, but they're having me do my part first, right? Improvising the melody, and then they're going to pass it off to the keyboard player, but I play by ear. So even though it might say E minor 7 or D major,
I understand.
Whatever. I hear the chords. So I was telling the guy, maybe we could do the keyboard first. He's like, that's kind of impossible because they're comping for you. They can just adjust. But it's going to be interesting. I'm doing it next week, so I'll be.
Oh, that's great.
I won't have the chords to listen to. It'll just be, all right. I see a chord symbol, which I may or may not know what that means, but maybe that's what $1 million ears are, is you can hear all the notes of a chord.
Yeah, you hear it.
Yeah,
you hear them.
I'm talking about you.
You hear it.
Yeah.
$1 million ears. So that was cool. So anyway, I ended up, as I said, my first boyfriend was Frank Foster, and we ended up sharing a furnished room together on John R. in Detroit. And then Frank went into the Korean War. So when Frank went into the Korean War, I said, oh man, I got to get to New York. I'm not going to stay in Detroit. It's prejudice. And not that New York isn't, but not as in the same degree as Detroit was. Plus, that's where Bird was. That's where bebop was. And I moved to Detroit. I was lucky because as I said, I had high school and I had taken up typing so I could get a job in an office doing typing, and support myself. And that's what I did. And I moved to New York, and I ended up, I had met Max Roach when I was, again, this kid in Detroit with Bird. And Max was very, very sweet, He remembered me. And then I met Charlie Mingus, and, I was going because the clubs at that time in New York were on the old 52nd Street, not the new 52nd, but the old. And they were the great clubs. And, oh my God, it was incredible. This music was all over this 52nd Street. I have a picture of me and Barry Harris because I ended up getting a loft in New York City. Originally, I lived in Brooklyn because I met Duke Jordan and I started going with him, and we ended up getting married. And by this time, Frank was out of the picture because he had just sort of disappeared. He had gone into the Army, and but before I really became totally involved with Duke Jordan, I had gotten this loft, and it was on what street was it on? 18th, I think 18th Street and 8th Avenue. And I would have sessions there because, as I said, Max and Mingus said, you need to study with Lenny Tristano. And, they knew I was looking for a teacher. And I said, oh, really? They said, yeah. They said, I said, well, yeah, but does he teach singers? They said, no, but I'm sure he would teach you. So my first lesson with Lenny, I went to Lenny and he said, I don't teach singers, but I will teach you because you come highly recommended by Mingus and Max.
Wow.
And
That's quite a recommendation right there, Sheila.
yes, it was.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. So he said, well, okay, this is your first lesson. I want you to learn. Now's the time. And he played it. And I said, yeah, well, I know it. He said, what do you mean you know it? I said, well, you mean, yeah, I know. I don't know it technically, but I know I can sing it. I can try to sing bird solo even. So he said, oh, yeah, well, let's hear it. So he thought I was bullshitting,
And then you did it, right?
And then I did it. And he said, oh, you do know it.
How does, now's the time, how does bird solo start? I'm not remembering all the
that's the piano does that.
Right. Amazing.
So yeah, so I sang it.
Amazing.
So then he said, okay, you do know it. He said, okay, Prez. Do you know Prez? I said, you mean Lester Young? He said, yes. I said, no, I don't know Prez. He said, well, then that's your lesson. I want you to learn Prez solo. And I ended up being with Lenny for several years. And actually, that's where I first started the bass and voice, because a bass player student of Lenny's was Peter Ind. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
I've heard the name. Yes.
Yes. So I got together with Peter. I said, Peter, I want to do bass and voice. I love the space, and I love all that open space, and I really feel, and I can hear the bass. And maybe I was a bass player in a previous life. I don't know, but I hear the bass, and I really want to. He said, oh, well, that's unheard of. I said, well, it's not impossible, is it? He said, no. So I said, well, we'll just rehearse. So that's what happened. So I started doing the bass and voice, and it was the first bass and voice. And the recording, I did a recording on a Peter Ind record. He recorded, and he used me on one tune, and I sang Yesterdays with just bass and voice. And that was the first time that anyone had ever recorded a bass and voice.
Wow. So yeah. What year was that with Peter? Like, what? Just give me a guess.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just give me a guess. Like 50s, 60s?
Oh, not the 60s.
Well, I don't know, Sheila.
No, I know. Hold on. It's hard for me to remember.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not giving you a hard time.
No, you're not giving me a hard time. I just don't have a good memory anymore.
Yeah, well, I don't either. But I'm just curious. So at some point, you do this first record with voice and bass.
Well, my daughter was born in 55, and this was before she was born. So this had to be in the early 50s. I would say the early 50s.
Okay.
And I started the bass and voice in the early 50s.
Right. And then, so that tradition carried on for quite a while in your life. I mean, even almost to present. On. Yeah, I was going to say to present.
I had it with Harvey for a while because I met Steve Kuhn, and I started working with his group because his agent said you need to get a singer in your group. And Kuhn liked me, so he hired me to be in his group. So I was with Steve Kuhn's band for quite a while. And that's where I met Harvey. And I asked Harvey, would you be interested in doing the bass and voice? Because I liked Harvey, what he was playing and, his dedication. And he said, yes, I would, but we have to rehearse. I said, of course we have to rehearse. And we worked out all these little arrangements that I do with bass and voice. I have a thing called the Dance Medley. It's all songs about dance because my the person that I loved before I heard Bird was Fred Astaire.
Oh,
He
Fred.
was my idol, man. I wanted to be Ginger Rogers. So, of course,
Right.
after I heard Bird, then Freddie took a second place. But I did work out this thing with bass and voice called the Dance Medley. And it's all tunes that have to do with dance, that have dance things in them. You know, like I could have danced all night. Let's face the music and dance. I won't dance. You know, I have a whole thing worked out, bass and voice, called Dance Medley, dedicated to Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Then I have one for musicians, and I wrote a little introduction, musical introduction on the musicians in my life that have encouraged me and supported what I do and who I feel very close to. So I wrote a little thing called, There Are So Many Beautiful Musicians Who Have Passed My Way. I have this whole little thing, and then I go into who these musicians are. And of course, they're Duke Ellington. So I do a Duke Ellington tune, you know, and then I do a Prez tune, and then I go into Bird. Okay. So it's just I still do it. It's my bass and voice. So I have that little section. I have the section on the Dance Medley. I have a section on children. I do Dat Dare, and a beautiful composition that Steve Swallow wrote for Robert Creeley Poetry, and we recorded it for ECM. And one of the tunes on that was She Was Young. So
that's a beautiful recording. That was one I was going to bring up if you didn't bring it up, with Swallow.
Oh yeah,
with Steve Swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that recording, what happened was I was working with Kuhn, and I think Swallow was on the date. And I met Steve Swallow. Actually, I met Steve Swallow before Steve. I met Steve Swallow at this club in the village called the Page 3, where I worked 2 nights a week. Steve was there on the Monday night, which was the jam session night. And Swallow played with the group, whoever that group was at the time. I think Johnny Knapp was a piano player. He was a jam session player. Oh, actually, yes, he was a jam session. And then on Tuesday, I worked with an incredible piano player, Herbie Nichols.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
He was a piano player that played for all of these, whatever you want to call them. There was a stripper, a woman who looked like a guy. And when she stripped down to the end, and she was a woman.
Wow.
Even though she looked like a boy.
Right.
And then he also played for an R&B singer and a comedian. That was Herbie Nichols.
You know, it's interesting because I think that for some people, when it comes to regarding jazz history, they're like, yeah, all they did was go to the clubs and play jazz tunes and jazz standards. But even Coltrane apparently played some R&B gigs or whatever. Herbie Nichols did what you said. I didn't know about the stripper thing. That's a very interesting story. Thank you, Sheila. But, you know, people who came up and are now, you know, renowned for their contribution to the music did other types of music just to either get along. Yeah, exactly. Just to get along, or because they enjoyed it, or like, I think
it was a gig.
Yeah, it was a gig.
Because there weren't like that many gigs that you could just do jazz.
Interesting, really.
Yeah. So in Herbie's case, he took a job where he played for, and I happened to be on one of the sets. I was on every other set. Like there'd be a set where it would have like a blues singer, a comedian, and a stripper. And then the second set I would be on, or would be, they called me a new note in jazz, and a dancer and whatever. I don't remember, a comedian, whatever. And And the piano player was Herbie Nichols. But on Monday night was session night. That was another piano player, one night only. And that's where I met Steve Swallow. Because Steve Swallow was the bass player for that session night, which was Monday night. And George Russell came in to hear Steve Swallow.
Can I interrupt you right there?
Sure.
We're talking about So here's how I discovered you, for lack of a better term. I was in college at New England Conservatory, and I was playing in George Russell's ensemble at the school. So this is like circa early 90s.
You played with George Russell?
I did. And I was a kid, right? And we were checking out this recording of You Are My Sunshine that you did. Do you remember that one?
Oh, how could I forget it? It was the beginning of my
holy
recording.
Shit, Sheila. Holy shit, Sheila. I'm going to swear that is just, I got goosebumps when I went back, whenever we first talked about you coming on the show, maybe 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, a week and a half, it doesn't matter. I went back and I listened to that, and maybe I had smoked some marijuana, okay? And I was listening to you sing, and I was like, how is she doing this? Like, do you remember, were you just singing?
I'll tell you the story.
Yeah, all right, tell the damn story. I just wanted to talk for a minute. All right, you got it.
No, go ahead. Finish your talk.
No, I'm just wondering if you were like singing alone like that, were you hearing anything in your ears as far as like comping in the studio? You know what I mean? I mean, it's just so blatantly amazing. And I went back and I rewound the thing and I listened again, and then I went back again and I listened again. And then George is working on his Lydian chromatic theory, and the arrangements are incredible, at least in my opinion. And then you come in with the, for lack of a better term, the melody. I mean, whatever, it's remarkable. And the audio quality is amazing. The performance is amazing. It's like this really, and that's how I met you back in the 90s without meeting you. But that was my introduction to Sheila Jordan.
That was in the early 60s, maybe 62.
Okay.
What happened? George Russell came in on a Monday night, jam session night, because as I said, Steve Swallow played that jam session. So he came in to see Steve Swallow, and he heard me sing. And I was sitting at the little table where the performers sat. And during the break, he came over to me because he'd already seen Swallow. He said, where do you come from to sing like that?
That's first of all, it sounds like George. Second of all, that's kind of what I thought.
I said, what?
How is she singing like that? Like, how is she doing this?
I thought he was insulting me.
Right, but he's not. It's a huge compliment.
No. He said, I said, what? He said, where do you come from to sing like that?
Yeah, right.
I said, I come from hell, man.
Did you really answer that? Wow.
I said, I come from hell. You know what he said? He said, really? He said, do you think I could visit hell with you one day?
Wow.
And I said, yeah, I guess. So he said, well, I gave him my telephone number, my, information, never thinking he would call. And I didn't really care one way or another. I thought he was, kind of, I don't know. I didn't think. And of course, I saw Swallow every Monday night at the session night at the club. So, and by the way, I made $6 a night at that gig.
Wow.
I paid the babysitter by this time I had my daughter, I paid the babysitter $4. And by the time I took a taxi home at 4:00 in the morning, that was it. But I didn't do it for the money because I had my day job typing and, in this advertising agency, Doyle Jane Bernbach. And it was just a typing job. So I was okay. So never thinking he would call me. Well, it wasn't too long after. I don't even think it was more than a couple of weeks at most. The phone rings and it's George Russell. And he said, "Are you free to see me?" I said, "Well, yeah, but I have to go pick my daughter up at nursery school, in another couple of hours." "Well, could you drop, where's the nursery school?" And I said, "Well, it's down in the village." He said, "Well, I'm in the village. Could you drop by? I'd like you to hear something." I said, "Okay." So I went by his apartment and I went in and I think he was on Jane Street.
Hey,
I can't remember.
Sheila, where did you come from? Being able, what did he say about singing? Where did you come?
Where did you come from to sing like that?
Everybody,
I came from hell.
Everybody, we'll make sure I'll have Lucy, my producer, put a link to that recording that Sheila did with George Russell, which she's about to tell us the full story. It's unbelievable. And it holds up to this day, even via the internet and whatever you listen to it on, or Spotify or YouTube. It's like, this is magic. Somewhere the gods or whatever you believe in, the universe like made this moment happen, and it's just all magic. I can't believe it. All right, so
now they're using it on a commercial.
Oh, fuckers. Are they paying you?
I hate that. I am so upset.
I'm sorry. Okay, hold that anger. Sheila's after the break, ladies and gentlemen. Sheila's going to yell. Sheila's going to yell at me. All right, folks. During or just before the break, Sheila, you were telling us the George Russell "You Are My Sunshine" story. I think you had just met him in the village, and then you were. I'm not sure where you were at in the story, but I think that's about
Page 3. I was at this club called the Page 3, and he came in to see Steve Swallow, who was a bass player. It was a session night, Monday night session night, and Swallow was a bass player on the session night. And so then, as I said, he asked me, "Where do you come from to sing like that?" And I said, "I come from hell." And he said, "Well, could we visit hell one day?" And I said, "Is this guy crazy?"
Right. Well,
so
and are like, is he hitting on you? Like, right? What is going on? Is it a compliment?
No, I didn't know what it was.
Right.
I didn't think it was hitting on me. I thought it was really interested in musically. How do I sing like that? Well, how? And I don't think it was anything else. So anyway, long story short, I gave him my information, called me up on the phone not too long after and said, "Are you free?" I said, "Well, I have to pick up my daughter in a couple of hours, my little girl. She was in nursery school in the village." And he lived on Jane Street, or he lived in the village. He had a furnished studio. So I said I could come down for, a couple of hours or so, or an hour, or, whatever, till I pick up my kid. So I went by his studio, and he said, "Okay, sit down. I'd like to play something for you." So he played this incredible. Is this wait a minute. I got to remember now. Where do you come from to sing like that? Oh, yes. At the beginning, when he asked me in that club, "Where do you come from to sing like that?" I said, I come from hell. He said, "Could I visit hell with you one day?" And I said, I laughed. So anyway, long story short, he called me and he said, "Are you ready to visit hell?" And I said, "What, are you kidding?" He said, "No. You said it was Pennsylvania." And I said, "Yeah, I grew up there as a kid. My mother was too young to take care of me." He said, "Well, I'd like to go back there. Is it okay?" I said, "Yeah, well, I got to get somebody to take care of my little girl," which I did. And he picked me up in his little Volkswagen. And we drove all the way back to Pennsylvania. And my grandmother was still alive at the time. So it's a coal mining area. It's near Johnstown. And actually, the claim to fame was Charles Bronson was from 2 miles away, and I was best friends with his sister. She was my best friend at one time. So anyway, long story short, my grandmother's still alive, and she said, let's go up to the Bund, which was a private club for coal miners. So we went up to the club. My grandmother could get in for some reason why, I don't know. And there was nobody there except one coal miner because all the miners were out on strike for a higher wage, better working conditions.
Sure.
And so my grandmother started bragging about me and George. And famous, we were famous and all that. And I said, Mom, I'm not famous. George Russell's famous, but I'm not famous. And so there was one old coal miner at the bar, only one old coal miner. And he was pretty loaded, but not too loaded. And he looked at me and he said, well, do you still sing You Are My Sunshine?
What? Wow.
And I said, what? Do you still sing You Are My Sunshine, Jeannie? Because my nickname was Jeannie.
Was Jeannie? I heard about that. Yeah.
I didn't like Sheila because I got teased as a kid because it was an unusual name at that time. So I went by Jeannie. My middle name was Jeanette, so I went by Jeannie. Jeannie Howell, or Jeannie Dawson. My last name was Dawson. So, but I went by my grandmother's, my grandfather's name sometimes, Jeannie. His name was Hull. So anyway, long story short, I said, no, I don't sing that anymore. And he said, why not? And George Russell said, yeah, why not? So there was an old out of tune, and I mean out of tune, big time, little piano. What do they call those little pianos?
A spinet? I don't know. An upright
Yeah,
spinet?
something like a spinet.
Yeah.
And in the corner. And so he went over and he started playing on it. It was very, very, it was terribly out of tune. So he started playing on it, and my grandmother was furious. Well, not furious, but she literally pushed him off the bed. She said, that's not the way it goes. Because George was playing all this, weird, which I loved,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And she said, that's not the way it goes.
Grandma's like, this is not the way it goes.
Pushed him off the bench, and she sat down. And she played it because she had taken piano when she was a kid, I guess. Because, that's another story. We never knew who her family was because she was left on a doorstep as a baby.
Wow, crazy.
So we never knew who her family was. But anyway, the family that took her in gave her piano lessons, and, she was pretty nice. And then my grandfather and everything else changed. We all went back to the worst, very poor. But anyway, long story short, she started playing and I started singing it with her. It was an old upright. That was the name of the piano, upright piano. So, okay, so that was it. So we got in the car and we came back. George saw where I lived and saw the coal mining area, saw that the miners were out of work and the whole trip. And he came back, and not too long after, a couple of weeks, he called me up. He said, are you free? And as I said before, I said, yeah, I will. I have a couple of hours and then I got to pick up my kid from nursery school. Can you stop by? Because he was in the village, which was close to the nursery school my daughter was going to. So I went by and he said, sit down, I want to play you something. So he played this incredible thing that he had played on, that he had, been playing in Pennsylvania, but I didn't really connect it, that it was the same song. So he was playing all this incredible stuff. And then he stopped. I thought, oh, well, that's nice. He said, okay, sing. I said, what? He said, sing. I said, sing what?
Right.
He said, sing You Are My Sunshine. I said, well, are you going to play for me? Accompany me? He said, no, sing it alone. Oh, no, I can't do that. He said, why not? You did it when you were a kid. I said, that's different. He said, no, it's not. Sing it. I said, oh, Jesus, what am I doing? Anyway, I sang it. A couple of weeks later, he calls me up from the recording studio. What record was that on? Do you remember? Riverside.
Yeah, Riverside, and I think Rudy Van Gelder was.
Rudy Van Gelder, correct.
Yeah.
So he calls me up from Rudy Van Gelder's, and he said, "I'd like you to come up here."
And Swallow, Steve Swallow was on that record too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's who he came in to see, at the page 3. I told you that, right?
Yes, you mentioned it before the break. So yeah, you've said it, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, no, Swallow was on that day because George used Swallow a lot. He loved his playing.
Right.
What wasn't to love? I would love Swallow.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I went in to Riverside and sat down and waited. And then all of a sudden, George plays this whole thing. He said, okay, sing now. And as I said, sing what? He said, sing You Are My Sunshine. I said, well, yeah, you're going to accompany me. He said, no, sing it alone.
Wow.
I can't do that. Yes, you can. No, I can't. Yes, you can. You did it when you were a kid. You can do it. Do it. And that was the beginning of Sunshine. Now, a lot of people don't know this, have not even heard this recording because it never, became famous, except for real true jazz lovers. He wanted to rename it. Instead of You Are My Sunshine, he wanted to call it a drinking song, but they wouldn't let him change it because it was a drinking song. And but he did talk about the coal miners, the out of work coal miners, and their plight and what they had to go through on the recording on Riverside. I believe he talked about it. And I sang it, and that was it.
I mean, I guess, as somebody, I do a little singing myself. I mostly play my saxophone or clarinet, bass clarinet, but it's if the note isn't there while you're singing the note or the melody, right? Then you have to make a relationship like you do when you do your bass duo stuff, right? So you're doing your part, the bass player, whoever it might be, is doing their part, and so you're making relations or not. But this You Are My Sunshine is just, I was like, how did she sing that by herself? Was somebody comping for her, but they didn't track it?
No.
It's just absolutely
No.
phenomenal.
But I sang by myself when I was a kid.
Right. Well, yeah.
It's the same thing.
It is, but it's not something that comes naturally to like everybody on the planet. Like this is
Well, not everybody, but it comes naturally to me because I've been doing it all my life.
Right. Well, it's phenomenal. And Sheila, would you mind? I'm just awestruck. And people, please go listen to this recording that we're referring to.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah. I'm gonna make sure the link. My producer.
And it's called The Outer View. Was the name of the recording, and it's the last tune on The Outer View. And it's just You Are My Sunshine.
Right.
And it is for the coal miners.
Absolutely. Bravo. So, Sheila, can we, as closing here?
One other thing. I just wanted to say one other thing.
Right.
And because of that, George Russell paid for me to do a demo with Barry Galbraith guitar, Steve Swallow on bass, and I think it was Ziggy Willman on drums. And he took that demo to Blue Note. Blue Note had never recorded a singer before.
You were the first
That's correct.
vocalist to be
On
signed.
Blue Note.
Yeah, on Blue
On
Note.
Blue Note.
Yep.
And Alfred Lyon was very much for it. He really dug what I was singing. And he signed me for one recording. I never did a second recording, but I did do the one. And that was because of George Russell. George Russell paid for this demo. He took it to Quincy Jones also, who was the A&R man at another record company. I forgot the name of that record company, but it was where Quincy Jones was working at the time.
Right.
I had already signed with Blue Note, so I couldn't do Quincy's. But
oh well.
Hey, maybe he'd record me today.
Yeah, you should reach out to Quincy's people and see if he'd like to have you do something. So, right, Sheila, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
The joy is mine.
And can I ask you one last question?
You can ask me anything you want.
So, do you know who John Rogers? He's a photographer in New York. Do you know him?
Of course, he's great.
He's amazing, and he's probably has photos of you, which I have yet to see, but I'm sure
he does.
Yeah, and he's taken photos of me and a bunch of other.
Yeah.
But he said that you gave Paul Motion the later pronunciation of his name. So I guess Paul Modian, that was you?
Yes. His real name was Paul. No, his real name was Paul Modian. That's how they pronounced it. And when I went to, I think it was London the first time, they were calling him Paul Motion. I said, no, his name is Modian, but it's spelled very similar to motion. So I came back and he was still going by Paul Modian. Paul was.
Yeah.
In America.
Wow.
And I said, do you know what they call you in Europe, in London? He said, no, what? I said, they don't call you Modian, they call you Motion. He said, oh, I like that. And he started calling himself Paul Motion. And he got famous, of course. And, he was Paul Motion. But originally, he was Paul Modian. Did you know that?
I did, because we grew up on, I had Bill Frisell on the show. So we talked about that trio with Motion, Joe Lovano, and Bill Frisell. And so I was very aware of that music back in college. And of course, since, then and I know he was Modian, but then I played a few weeks at the Village Vanguard with Motion, and Paul never corrected any of us. We would just call him Paul or Motion, and he was fine. I mean, it wasn't when we were on stage, we're like, hey, Motion, what do you want to do now? He's like, let's do this song. It wasn't as if, I don't know how much he was sold on the whole idea of how.
You mean of changing to motion?
I don't know. I'm just saying.
I don't think as I said, when I told him years ago when it first went down, he was Paul Modian. And I said, do you know what they call you? As I said before, do you know what they call you? In London, they call you Paul Motion.
Right.
He said, I like that.
Right.
And I think he started using motion from then on in.
There we go. Well, I'm glad we got that straightened out. I mean, I have a last name of D'Angelo, but when I go to Italy, they say D'Angelo. They don't say D'Angelo, they say D'Angelo.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And I have family with the last name Schroeder, but some people say Schrader. It's like, who knows? At this point, it's just like one of these things. All right. I'm not really sure what else. I have a few other, fan comments and questions if you want to hear them. But hey, what's the commercial they're using your that song for? You Are My Sunshine. You said they were using it for a commercial.
What?
You said they were using You Are My Sunshine for a commercial? Did I hear that correctly or no?
Yes, not me singing it.
Oh.
There's just a whole chorus singing it. It's awful. It's for some kind of a medication for, I don't know. You'll probably see it.
Okay.
Well, I was very upset.
Yeah, that's gross. Like Temetavir or some.
And
weird...
they have a please don't take my sunshine away. It's a whole bunch of a chorus of, oh, terrible.
So let's go through a few of the social media comments when I asked people if they had wanted to ask you anything.
Okay.
And this gentleman, Mark Mahoney, says that she's been making a lot of appearances in Cambridge at Monkish with Yoko Miwa's trio the last few years. I saw her perform there. And at Monkfish, she holds a master class with up-and-coming student vocalists. And also, he jokingly says, I hear she's not a fan of bad student charts, from what I could hear.
No, it's not that I'm a fan. It's just that I found out very early in music that you have to have a good lead sheet in order to, especially if you're going to tour and go and work with musicians that you've never met before. It's one of the most important things that singers have to do is make sure that they have a good lead sheet. And by that, I mean a lead sheet that has the chord changes in your key, the melody notes in your key, and the lyrics underneath, all the lyrics, and a very, very, clean lead sheet. And then at the top, I put the name of the composition and who wrote it underneath, who the composers are. Because you'll get to concerts or gigs and how can you remember who wrote these tunes? I can't. And then over in the up on the right-hand corner, I always put my name in case it gets lost, then my name is on there. I never take the originals. I leave the originals at home, God forbid. If it gets lost and it was the original, then I'd be screwed. So I leave the original at home, and I always take like 3 copies, piano, bass, and drums, because I usually don't work with anything else except a trio, piano, bass, and drums. I do have beautiful arrangements by an incredible piano player, Alan Broadbent, who's done some incredible string quartet arrangements for me. So I have string quartet arrangements that do a whole evening of music. So that's wonderful.
I heard I've heard some of that string quartet with you.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Sheila, I'm trying not to be a fanboy over here. I'm trying to be have a perspective as an interviewer, but I am so endeared by your music, and at my age,
thank you.
At my age, that means what, 25, 30 years, something like this. And I know Jay Clayton. I grew up with Jay Clayton. I think you two at least know each other if you're not friends, right? You and Jay Clayton?
Oh, Jay, yeah. She shares. Actually, she rents my daughter's old bedroom for her, where she teaches, her studio in my apartment in New York City.
Wow, there you go. And yes, I hope Jay is amazing. And I grew up.
I love her.
She's from Seattle, or at least I feel like she.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's where
time there. Yes.
Right, and that's where I'm from. So I feel like I grew up on Jay, and I hope to have her on the show at some point.
Oh yeah, you should, because she's got a good story.
So do you know Jake Bergevin? Is that somebody you know personally,
or
Jake Bergevin?
No. I'm not saying I don't know him. I just don't know him by that name. Know that name.
Well, anyway, Jake is a trumpet player and also teaches a very nice music program in the Seattle area. And
I don't know many musicians in Seattle. I haven't spent any time there. I think the only time I was in Seattle is through Jay years ago.
Right, at Cornish or something like this, right?
Yes,
yeah,
correct.
But anyway, Jake says, so cool you're having Sheila on the show. She seems like an eternal optimist, and it's contagious. Ask her what her secret is for staying so bright and swinging.
Jazz music.
Right. So what does that mean?
I'm sure that I know this gentleman, It's just like offhand, I can't remember the name, but I'm sure we met.
Fair enough.
Might have even done some music together when I was out that way.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, Jake Bergerden and I grew up together, so I know him from childhood. I don't necessarily know so much about his professional career, but he's a good guy. And I just thought that was really nice. And so, Jake, Sheila says it's jazz, and I don't know if she wants to elaborate on that, but I guess just...
It's jazz music.
Yeah. And then there's this good friend of mine, Carolyn Castellano, who has her own incredible music education program in Boston, in Brookline. And Carolyn says, I love her so much. I actually listen to one of her music every week, which means she probably means I listen to her music every week. She's so cool. And that's amazing because Carolyn is around a lot of young people and a lot of young musicians and has a lot of influence, and very talented people go through her program. So that's kind of cool, right? That's just nice.
Oh man, I'm honored. Are you kidding? Cool is beyond cool. Yes, I mean, seriously, it's just so wonderful to know that there's beautiful people like that out there willing to keep the music alive. That's my fear, is that it will not be kept alive because nobody wants to worry about, nobody wants to worry about jazz, blah, 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 blah. Let me tell you something. I call jazz music the stepchild of American music. And the reason I call it the stepchild of American music is because it's the only music that America can really call its own. It's the one music, the one art form that we can really call our own. It started in America. How did it start? This woman came up to me one time and said, boy, you must have an incredible degree in music college. By the way you sing and what you did and how you talk, blah, blah, blah. I said, excuse me. Let me just tell you what my degree is, or how I learned my degree. I said, this music started in the cotton fields. Slaves were thrown into the cotton fields to pick cotton for hours and hours on end, with very little sleep, very little food, and no money. How did they get by? They sang the blues. It started with the blues, and that's where it started. Now, if you want to call that a degree, then it's a degree, but that's where it started. She had no idea. She thought you went to college and learned this music in college and you got a degree. No, you don't. You get a degree in life, okay? And that's how it started. It started with the African population being thrown into cotton fields to pick cotton. And that's how they got through. They just started to sing the blues. That's my feeling. I could be dead ass wrong, but I don't think I am. I really don't. It started with the African population working like beyond means. Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And again, I can't correct you or reinforce what you said because I don't know. I've heard many different versions of the derivation of jazz and what that means. And I understand that everybody has a perspective. But the reality is, Charlie Parker said, hey, you kid, get over here. You're going to sing with me. That's your education right there, right? This is how that education happens. It's not like second period learn about jazz education. He just called me the
kid with the $1 million ears.
Right.
And when I came to New York years later, and I went to hear him at Birdland, a friend of mine was going, and she said, I'm a good friend of Bird's. You want to come with me? Because I know you love him. You love his music. I said, oh, yeah, I'd love to. And that was before I met Duke Jordan. And I went with her, and he hugged her and kissed her. He looked over, he saw me. He said, I know you. You're the kid with the $1 million ears. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock.
That's
right?
amazing.
I was in shock.
That's amazing.
In the meantime, Frank Foster came
Excuse me.
home on leave from the Korean War, and he came, you know, we were still sort of together, but not quite. We were sort of becoming more friends than anything else. And at that point, because he was gone, and, you know, I said, Frank, get your horn and let's go up to Birdland and hear Charlie Parker. He said, really? I said, yeah. He said, oh, I'd love to go hear Bird. I said, okay, come on. So he's walking out the door. I said, where's your horn, man? He said, oh, I don't want to take my horn. I said, well, I'll take it. Come on, maybe there'll be a session.
Yeah, you never know, right? Yeah, bring your horn.
So we get to the old Birdland, not the new Birdland, the old one on 52nd Street.
Right.
Bird comes up to me after the set, you know, during the break, and he said, you know, glad to see me, gave me a kiss and a hug. And I said, Bird, this is Frank Foster. He's a wonderful saxophone player. Bird looked at me and said, oh, man, you got your horn. Yeah, come on up and play. Frank said, oh, no, I don't.
Awesome. That is so
I
awesome.
don't think I could. Bird said, yeah, you can. I'm inviting you. Don't turn me down, man. No, don't turn me down, soldier boy.
Is that what he
That's
said?
what he said. Don't turn me down, soldier boy.
Right. Wow.
And I hit Frank like this. I said,
come on, Frank. Come on,
get
man.
up there and blow, man. And he did, and he was incredible. And I'll never forget that. And Frank later on wrote about it somewhere, how I had introduced him to Charlie Parker.
Check. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Well, you probably told this story before, but oh my God, that is amazing. You'd never know. Like I was talking with some producer the other day, and we were talking about different recordings. Like Michael Jackson's Thriller was one of them. Then we were talking about Miles Davis Kind of Blue, where the engineer refused to work with Miles, so they ended up using the assistant engineer in the studio. Like there's all kinds of stories where things just kind of happen in this way that you never expected, and they become iconic moments in time. And it's like, you cannot script this stuff. You cannot write it out.
No, it's there. And I remember one other thing that you just said about Miles. When Miles was in Bird's band, Charlie Parker's group had Miles.
Yeah.
And the piano player was Duke Jordan.
Right. Is that how you met Duke, or no?
Oh, no. I met Duke in Detroit.
Right.
But I met him later on after I came to New York. And then after, you know, the whole thing with Frank was kind of over, I started going out with Duke and ended up marrying him. But the thing that the amazing thing was, and I just want to close with this, is that I was at a sound check at Birdland, again, the old Birdland. And it was Charlie Parker and his group. The group was Duke Jordan piano, Max Roach drums, Miles Davis trumpet. So Miles did not like Duke. Didn't like his playing. He was always after Duke. So Miles said to Bird, man, why don't you get yourself John Lewis or some other cat on piano instead of this cat? And I thought, oh my
Great
God.
invitation.
I'm at the sound check. So I'm sitting right there watching this whole thing go down. I said, oh my God, what is Bird going to say? But he said what I thought he would say. He said, Miles, this is my band. When you get your band, you get John Lewis or another piano player. But this is my band. Right. And my piano player is Duke Jordan. Now, if you don't like that, you can leave.
This is my show, and this is my guest, Sheila Jordan, right? This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to talk to this amazing woman and singer, everything that you encapsulate in this world.
Thank you.
You are just such a bright, shining light in
Thank
this world. And Sheila, I want to say thank you. That's a great way to end. And I hope you have a beautiful night and get some rest, and maybe watch a documentary or something and just relax, or whatever you like to do.
Will do.
All right. Thank you.
Be in touch.
All right. I will stay in touch.
Please be in touch, Andrew. Please.
I will. We have to maybe do something someday, you know? Like,
yes. Why not?
Play a song together.
Yes.
Like,
why not?
How dare you sing like that? What did George Russell say? Come on, just one more time for the road. What did George Russell say?
Where do you come from to sing like that? Where do you come from to sing like that?
I don't even know what that means, George, but it's absolutely like.
But it wasn't done as an insult.
No, it's like you're too good to be true.
Where do you come from to sing like that? And I said, I come from hell, man. Well, can I visit hell with you sometime?
Oh my God. If that's actually what went down, they got to make a movie about you. That's amazing. All right, Sheila, have a great evening. Love you. All right.
Love you. Stay in touch, Andrew.
All right. Talk to you later.
Keep playing, man.
I'll keep playing. You keep singing too. Keep playing.
Love you.
All right. Love you too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Constant Constance. Tune in every week for new conversations. And if you want even more, check out Andrew's Patreon for more exclusive content and additional conversations. Hosted and produced by Andrew D'Angelo. Edited and mixed by Lucy Little. Original music by Andrew D'Angelo and Maximilian Moore D'Angelo. Intro is Henrietta Weeks. Thanks so much. See you next time.
You fucking rocked it. Like she doesn't know she says podcast, right? Like she doesn't even